Hi guys, it's Wendy with Ask The Landlady, and I'm here with all the tips and tricks to help you make a profit in real estate rentals. And today I have alarming news. Short-term rentals are crashing. So this is something that anybody out there doing Airbnb, thinking about doing Airbnb, you need to know this. We need to talk about this because a few years ago, if you had any spare bedroom, you had a lake house, you had a condo somewhere downtown, you'd throw it on Airbnb and the money just printed itself. Fantastic. Everybody, was so excited about Airbnb. It was like families of five were like, oh, just get an Airbnb, girlfriend trips, Airbnb, bachelor parties, Airbnb. I wouldn't want them in there. But anyway, people were pulling in $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month on this extra place that they had that they weren't there all the time. And it was just fantastic. There were YouTube channels, courses, maybe you went to them, entire podcasts about Airbnb and how amazing and awesome it was. But things have changed. So here's what happened. Occupancy rates are down. Revenue per listing is down. Regulation is tightening up in lots of cities. And a lot of hosts who bought properties specifically to do STRs, short-term rentals, are looking at a building that no longer makes sense. So is this a crash? Is it a correction? Is it just a shakeout that gets the serious people away from the dilettantes? I don't know. Let's talk about this. The honest picture right now is what you need to know, especially if you're a short-term rental host or wanting to be one, because there are some significant things happening in Airbnb and you need to be ready to pivot, change, do things differently, whatever. So let's step back. Welcome back to Ask the Landlady. I'm Wendy Myers, and a quick note before we get into it. I know that my spicy title today, short-term rentals are crashing. It's a little spicy, and I'm going to tell you, it just depends where you're at and what type of host you are, okay? I don't want you to be offended right from the beginning. For some people in some markets, it's generally a crash. Revenues are down 30%. Properties are empty. Mortgages aren't getting covered. For other hosts in other markets, business is perfectly fine, strong even. So we're going to separate what's actually happening from the hype, right? Because in both directions, because I've seen many hosts panic when they shouldn't, and they like sell when they didn't need to, or just whatever, start slashing prices. And then I've seen some hosts that are just stubbornly trying to hold on when they really shouldn't. So I'm going to walk away with some clarity on this issue. So let's get into it and see if this market would work for you or is still working for you. So start with the data. Like I said, I like the math, and I want to see what's going on. So first of all, Airbnb, the company, is doing great. Airbnb, the experience for a lot of hosts, different story. So that tension is the key to understanding how things are going. At the corporate level, total bookings and their platform revenue is grown significantly in the past few years. Demand for short-term rentals is real and ongoing. People aren't going back to just hotel rooms, especially you got a big family, you want to have a family reunion, whatever. They're not going to go back to just staying in hotels, right? Airbnb is very viable, huge, so perfect at that level. But here's the problem. Supply has exploded. Too much. By June of 2025, last June, the short-term rental market hit 1.76 million active listings, which was a 6.1% increase from the previous year. Rural areas up by 23%, suburban areas 18%. That's huge. So what happens when supply grows more than demand? You guessed it, occupancy drops, prices drop. The pie is getting divided into too many slices, right? Suddenly, when I was getting my $5,000 piece of pie, I'm now getting a $1,200 piece of pie, and that hurts. So that's kind of what we're looking at. The average short-term rental, STR, Airbnb, whatever you want to call it, occupancy rate was about 56% in 2025. And in September, they were about 12% below the month before. So that's going down. So a host that used to be filling 76% of the time, it's now like 55% of the time. Same property, same market. Suddenly the math that made that look good, not looking so good anymore, right? And it's not, and if it was just occupancy, but it's not. Our supply costs on the other side of the ledger are going up too. Try to get somebody to come in and clean the place for, less than $25 an hour. Mortgage rates are double what they were. A lot of people who bought these on adjustable rate mortgages are just being killed. Insurance premiums, especially I'm looking at you, Florida and California and Texas, your insurance rates skyrocketed, which has suddenly affected your bottom line. Maintenance costs, property taxes, blah, blah, blah. That's all gone up. So when your prices go down and your expenses go up, that's a disaster waiting to happen. So here's the honest summary here. Airbnb is healthy. The short-term rental gold rush, however, is over, right? It's not suddenly Airbnb it, I'll just Airbnb it. It's not so easy anymore. This is separating out the real people from the hobbyists, right? The people who are really going to do this as a career and the people who are just doing this for funsies, because it's no longer funsies, okay? There's too many factors there to do that. So let's get specific, because the national numbers don't tell your story. Your story is told by your market. I always say that. I always go back to your personal market. Oversaturation is worse in some places, like especially things that exploded during the pandemic travel, like Phoenix. That went from like $5,000 Airbnb listings in 2017 to over 21,000 in 2025. That's crazy. That's a huge oversaturation of that market. 4 times as many listings in the same, but the same people traveling. So you're all fighting for those same amount of people, but you're sharing it with a lot more people. Crazy. Certain Florida markets went through a similar explosion, and now they're dealing with that crazy hangover. So before, when you could get like $300 a night, now you're struggling to get it at $200, and you just keep dropping the price. So you're looking at 33-40% costs, prices down. That hurts. And occupancy fell. So that's that. But here's what's important. The story is different in smaller, less saturated markets, and that might be where you are. So destinations with genuine, like year-round or event-driven demand, they haven't been flooded with supply. Think like Broken Bow Lake in Oklahoma, Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and Pigeon Forge. People are going there year-round, and so that has stayed stable and done really well with Airbnb. Smaller coastal regions, not the big places where they're being hit with all those high costs. The smaller markets are getting solid returns. And of course, if you're in a city where you've got a lot of great sports teams, you can count on, like say Pittsburgh, you got the Steelers games, you got the Pirate games, you got the Penguin games, and you're situated to take advantage of those and not worry about the rest of the time. Have at it. You're still doing well in Airbnb. So, okay. If oversupply wasn't an issue, like in some of these places, oversupply is not a problem. There's a second wave that's hitting that, and this is not going to go away, unfortunately. This is regulation. Now, I try to be a responsible landlady, so I welcome, a market that keeps everybody accountable. But some of this is getting pretty crazy out there in terms of regulation. There's a lot of cities that are saying, this is, taking away from our neighborhood character when you're letting people come in. And then there's also local governments saying, there's my piece of the pie. They want to get some money out of this too. So regulation is creeping in that's going to cause some issues for some of these areas. And so this could actually be kind of complicated. So let's just talk about a few areas in specific. Let me give you some specifics. That's a hard word for me to say, specifics. Okay. Anyway, let me give you some details. New York City is the most dramatic example of aggressive regulation. They have this local law 18 where your hosts, the Airbnb hosts, have to register with the city. They have to be present while somebody's there. You can't be out gallivanting in Florida while somebody's taking your place in New York City. You have to be present through the whole guest day, and you can only host no more than 2 guests at a time. What's the point of that, right? I mean, that's why you wanted Airbnb, so you can put your family of 5 there. So thousands of Airbnb listings vanished overnight. The New York City market is crazy. And there's a bunch of lobbying trying to get that done, but as of right now, still a bad situation for Airbnbs. Los Angeles, they cap unhosted short-term rentals at 120 nights per year. If you miss that, then you are operating illegally. They also impose a 14% occupancy tax. There's that cha-ching where they want to take some money out of your pockets. That's something you need to know if you're in those markets. San Francisco, you have to be a permanent resident. So you can't own something in San Francisco but live in Chicago, right? So you have to do that. And they have some caps and taxes too. Dallas actually tried to ban them in 2023. Courts have put that on hold while they're still going through it, but that's something that people are looking at. They're hearing from homeowners that, there's lots of neighborhoods in Orlando that don't like to see, they're like, I've lived here forever and I don't like to see a new family coming in every night to go to Disney World, and they're loud and da da da. And HOAs, they hate them. They'll put a caps on them too. So you have to be really careful with all that regulation, particularly before you buy something and find out you can't Airbnb it, right? So that's something that you definitely need to look at it. And I usually stick to the US on things, but I know I have some international people out there watching. Thank you. Love you, people. And it's not just an American story. Budapest is banning short-term rentals entirely. And Spain and France are both tightening their enforcement on them as well. So it's something that's kind of a worldwide phenomenon, which is kind of interesting. Because Airbnb was so magical at first, and now everybody's like, oh, not so magical, and they're jumping in to really make things hard for people. So, and here's the thing you need to know about Airbnb. If you're like, well, I'm living here in Gatlinburg, there's no problem with any of this. Well, you might not have a regulated market today, but you might tomorrow. The wave is moving. If we're seeing it all worldwide, cities are going to wake up. Cities that were hands off a couple years ago, new sheriff comes into town, so to speak, and suddenly they want a piece of your pie with occupancy tax, or they suddenly start to listen to homeowners wanting to ban them, hotel people who are lobbying. There's a lot of factors there. This could change overnight. So when you buy a property, if you're buying it just for short-term rental, I always want you to be careful, because that could change in a dime, in an instant. So this is the question I've been getting then. This all leads to the thing, especially some short-term rental people now, they're coming to me and saying, what do I do now? Should I convert to a long-term rental? And the honest answer is, well, it depends. Depends on your numbers, depends on your market, your mortgage. So let's get to it. Let's try to analyze this. First, you need to figure out what your short-term rental is actually netting. Not gross revenue, net. After you pay your platform fees, your cleaning, your maintenance, your vacancies, all that. When you come down to the end and find out what you're netting, then you want to compare that to what a long-term person would pay. So if you're netting, say, $1,200 a month at the end of all that, but you could put somebody in that same place as a long-term rental at $2,000 a month, that's a no-brainer. $800 more a month, let's get somebody long-term in there, because you're not going to be having all that cleaning and turnover and platform fees and hassle, right? So that would be the first thing you want to look at. Always want to look at the money first, honey. Look at that money first. Two, what does the long-term rental market look like in your area? If rents are strong, you're going to see that gap for sure. If it's not a big rental town, then no, then you do want to stick with that short-term rental. Third, what's your regulation exposure? If you're in a city where you can see it tightening, I'd convert now before it becomes a problem, before you're forced to. Maybe start to work on that now into terms of getting a long-term rental in there. And fourth was, what is your original underwriting? If you bought a property assuming that STR income, that short-term rental income, to cover the mortgage, and the long-term rental won't cover it, that's a real problem that nothing's going to fix. New pictures, redecorating, whatever. You might be looking at actually selling that property before the values soften further in your market. So instead of converting, you may actually want to sell if it's going to turn you upside down on your mortgage. So if you're in this Airbnb game right now and you're struggling, those are the factors you want to look at now. See if you can do that long-term rental. That would be ideal if you could. But if you can't, then maybe you look at selling, right? Pretty it up and get a profit out of it another way. And then buy somewhere else where the rentals are good. So now I don't want to leave you again with the impression that short-term rentals are dead, because they're not. They're definitely not. It was a $72 billion industry in 2025, and it's still growing. So it is still there. The demand is real. So here's where it's going to make sense as a STR host in 2026. First of all, tourism-driven destinations, obviously, with genuine year-round stuff. Like I said, Broken Bow Lake, Hawaii, Gatlinburg, stuff like that are still the highest performing. Branson, Missouri, believe it or not, highest performing STRs in the country. You got that going for you? That's a check mark, yes. Event-driven markets, like I said, if you're in Pittsburgh, big sporting teams, festivals, stuff like that you can make money off those alone, another big check. Third, unique differentiated properties, right? They're not going to pay for some sleazy little bad condo. But if you've got like a tiny home in the woods, right? Or I've seen people with Harry Potter inspired decor, or you make it friendly for wine nights with your girlfriends, right? Whatever. If you do those unique niche type things, another check in your box that you're going to be seen and pulled out of that Airbnb pool. And then last is just your merging secondary markets with low current supply. Is there a place you travel to and there's not, you're like, it's hard to find an Airbnb there? That's your place. And people, the key, just like that, I always say, don't try to time the market, but this is one where if you see a need, jump on it right before the Instagram crowd finds it, because then that's when it's too late. It's going to be too expensive to jump in. But if you notice an area where you can't find an Airbnb and you're like, this could really use one, they have all these short-term workers coming in or whatever, then yeah, like a place, a hospital where there's a lot of traveling nurses and they can't find a place to put them up, maybe work out a deal where you can buy something and put them in there. Absolutely. So here's the deal. The era of lazy passive income from Airbnb is over, gone. The era of strategic, professionally operated short-term rentals, very much alive. Two different businesses, right? So here's where, again, I'm going to be honest with you. If you bought a property specifically for STR income, it's no longer covering your costs, you need to make a decision soon, right? Market is not going to rescue you. It's not going to change. Sorry, this is unprofessional. I don't want to cough on you either. So occupancy is not going to magically recover to pre-pandemic levels or whatever. So regulation is not going to loosen. If you're dealing with those episodes, it's time to get out and get out now. Sell or convert. That's your options there. Unless you can, or third, I guess you can beef up your professional operations, really differentiate yourself and go all in on it. That's your third thing. What you cannot do is nothing. Waiting is not a strategy. Hoping, not a strategy. You got to take some sort of action. On the other hand, if you're well positioned, you're doing well, if you're fine on regulation, you're more than fine, because again, Airbnb is not going away. People still want to do that. So the shakeout that we're happening now, that we're, maybe you've seen the headlines, Airbnb is dead. Not true. Short-term rentals are here to stay. It's the end of easy short-term rentals, right? And that's, honestly, that's probably healthy. That's a market that started and is now doing a correction, and we're going to have all great Airbnbs, because that's what will survive this whole wave. So, and my daughter's told me some horror stories about some Airbnbs she stayed at. We had one where they wouldn't come and unlock the door for us. We had to put our daughter on the roof through a window to get in. I mean, yeah, those hosts probably should not be doing it. Let's be real. So in this episode, we've talked all about short-term rentals. I hope I've helped explain the situation about the Airbnb crash. So hit that like button if you learned something today, and let me know. Are you doing Airbnb? Are you suffering? Are you striving for success? What do you do with Airbnb? Shoot me a comment down there. I'd love to hear about it. Definitely check out my books on Amazon, and definitely hit subscribe so we can keep talking real estate every week. And if you missed my previous episode, go back and watch that. That was about house hacking, which is kind of another way you might want to do it with your STR, another way to deal with that. So check that out. I am the landlady, and I will see you next week. Have a great day.